Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the changes heading into patch 8.9 and take a look at how the changes will affect the champions and look at the new strong and weak picks heading into next patch. So to start off here, we're going to take a look at the biggest change or changes heading into 8.9, and that is to the mana pool changes to a lot of the AP mid laners, and there's also quite a few other AP item changes in 8.9 as well. So up on screen here, I do have all the changes to the mana items for 8.9, and let's go ahead and break these changes down. So the first three changes there I have are going to be affecting the champions I have on the left side of the screen. So what they're going to be doing in 8.9 is they're going to be increasing those champions mana pools by around 75 per champion, and that's their level 1 mana pool. This is going to differ a little bit depending on the champion, so some champions are going to have their mana pool increased by a bit more than 75 and some by a bit less. Their mana regen at level 1 is also going to be increased by 0.4, and then their mana per level is going to be lowered by around 25 per champion. And then there's also changes to Lost Chapter, Doran's Ring, and Tier. So they're increasing the price of Lost Chapter, they're increasing the AP though, as well as the mana regen on level up. Doran's Ring is now just going to have less mana sustain overall, and then Tier is going to cost a little bit more, and it isn't going to give you as much mana refund when you use an ability. So basically what these changes mean here for these champions affected by the first three changes is that you are going to have more mana for the first few levels. Once you hit level 3 or 4 though, you will have less mana. So any champion that does have a really good level 1 or level 2 all in is going to benefit from these changes more than other champions. So someone like Cassiopeia here getting changed is going to be probably the most, she's going to benefit the most from these changes. A lot of the other champions being affected aren't really like super strong all-in early game champions, so Cassio is really the only one that really stands out to me here. And then because once you do hit like level 3 and 4, and once you get to a point where you want to start roaming, because you will now have less mana than in previous patches, and also because Lost Chapter costs 200 gold more, it is going to be a lot harder for shove and roam mid laners to really succeed, because if you're going to be shoving the wave out and just trying to push the enemy in, then you are going to be losing more mana than before, and because it's now going to take longer for you to get that base in to grab the Lost Chapter, your ability to influence the map in the early game will be a little bit weaker in next patch on champs like Taliyah. And then basically any champion that does not start Doran's Ring will kind of get indirectly buffed in next patch, and then any champion that does rely a lot in the early game on Doran's Ring sustain will be indirectly nerfed. So champions like Echo, for example, or Kassadin, or Fizz, Katarina, any champion that would start like Doran's Shield or Dark Seal isn't really going to be affected by that Doran's Ring change, and I think that we're probably going to see more champions now in next patch swap over to something like the Dark Seal as a starting item, and I feel like that will become more popular in 8.9. Ludens and GLP users are also indirectly buffed with these changes, because not only is Tier getting nerfed, Ludens and GLP, which we're going to talk about in a bit here, are also getting buffed in next patch. So we might see quite a few Tier users, for example, Syndra, Taliyah are two champions that would like to go Tier, but with the Tier nerfs and with the Ludens and GLP buffs, we might see more champions swap over to going Ludens and GLP in next patch. So here are the changes to Hextech GLP. The mana on the item is getting increased by 100, and then the slow decay is getting increased from 1 second up to 2 seconds. I think that because of these changes here, and then because of the nerfs to Tier, 8.9 will be the patch to where a few mid lane champions do swap over to this Hextech GLP item. I think one champion in specific that we'll probably see build this item more often is Taliyah. Other champions that do benefit a lot from getting a slow on the opponent and then lining up their abilities may also pick up this item in 8.9. And then Ludens users are also getting indirectly buffed for 8.9. The total cost on the item is getting lowered, and the mana on the item is getting increased by 100, so the same amount of increase as the Hextech GLP. So Spellbinder is getting some buffs for 8.9. It's getting changed to where the cost is getting increased, the AP is getting increased though. The active max AP you get from stacking it up is being decreased, but the active movement speed is being increased here. So I think that on a few champions, we might see Spellbinder being bought in 8.9. So any champion that can stack it up really quickly, like Ryze, Cassiopeia, Karthus, we may see it on those champions. I still don't think it's gonna make the item like super strong. I think that other core items will still be better than Spellbinder in 8.9, and it's at most just gonna be like a niche item on a few different champions. So after months and months of Warwick being the best jungler and just being a super solid pick in the jungle, he's finally getting a nerf in 8.9. This is only getting a 1 rating here though, because I just don't think it's enough to really push Warwick out of tier 1. He's still going to be a great pick. He'll be a little bit worse for 8.9, but it's not really going to affect his status in my opinion. His base AD is getting lowered by 3, and then his Q's max health damage is getting lowered by 2% once you get it maxed out there. It's not even decreased at all at level 1, and at level 2 it's only decreased by 0.5. So honestly, these are very little nerfs to Warwick, and you're still gonna see him in 8.9. So Rammus is getting buffed in 8.9. Now, I already think in 8.8 right now, Rammus is actually very underrated because you can fit him into a lot of different team compositions just because there are a lot more full AD comps being played right now in this meta. His W's bonus armor is being increased from 20 up to 30, and because right now in the mid lane, Zed and Yasuo consist of like 20% of the pick rate for mid laners, and then in the jungle, pretty much the first like 5 or 6 jungle champions right now are like jungle AD assassins, so Lee Sin, Kayn, Kha'Zix, and if you can get to the mid to late game as Rammus against those champions and you just don't like fall super far behind in the early game, then he's going to be a very good pick in next patch. So I would definitely recommend picking him up, especially if you are in the lower elos. This is a champion who has not been in the meta for quite some time now. I actually can't really remember back to when Poppy was actually a top tier pick in the top lane, but she is getting a few nerfs and a few buffs. Her move speed is getting lowered. Her passive range is getting increased from 300 up to 350. Her W's movement speed as well as her W's armor and magic resist are getting lowered. Her E's range though is getting increased there, and then a change to her ultimate, which I actually think is pretty big, is that when you knock up the enemy now, if your ultimate is not fully charged and you're just using it for the knockup, then the enemy is actually not going to be untargetable. You're still going to be able to hit them. So that means that Poppy's gank assist now at level 6 will be quite a bit better because you can knock the enemy up and then your jungler can keep dealing damage to them and you can also deal damage to them. So I think this change is nice here for Poppy. I'm just not too sure if the buffs are going to outweigh the nerfs, because the nerfs there to the movement speed on her W and the armor and MR are actually decently significant. They're not super big, but the other buffs that she got also aren't super big either. So I'm not too sure if these changes are really going to make Poppy that much better for 8.9. So Lux is getting buffed again for 8.9. There's a lot of different changes here, so I'll just give a quick TLDR on the changes. Basically, her Q is getting buffed all around. The cost on it is getting decreased and the damage is going up. Her W is now going to shield for more, and then her E is going to cost less. It's going to be on a lower cooldown, but it is going to be harder to hit now because the missile speed is getting decreased and the AoE radius is getting lowered. So I think that overall, this should make Lux's early game and her laning phase a little bit weaker just because it's going to be harder to hit her E and it's going to be harder to land the poke. But come the mid to late game and when you are starting to team fight, this will end up being a pretty big buff to Lux because she's going to be shielding for more. Her Q is going to deal more damage, is also going to be on a shorter cooldown, and then her E is also going to be on a shorter cooldown as well. So overall, these are some pretty nice buffs for Lux. So probably the most interesting changes for 8.9 are to kennen. Now what they're doing here, a TLDR on these changes, is that they're putting more power into the 5th hit on his W in the early game, and they're putting more power into the active part of his W once you do reach the mid to late game and once you get a lot of AP. They're also making it so that if you do build AD kennen now, then the 5th hit from your W is actually going to deal a lot more damage. Another really interesting change here is to kennen's E. When you hit an enemy with your E, it's now going to give you attack speed for 4 seconds, and this is actually quite a lot of attack speed here. It's going to scale up to 70% attack speed at rank 5. So I think overall with these changes, you've got Reckless right now looking over these patch notes, and he's getting into solo queue and he's preparing his AD kennen for the summer split, because I think that with these changes, we are going to see a return of AD kennen. I'm not too sure what the build exactly is going to be, because he did actually get a pretty nice buff there to the active AP ratio on his W. The AD ratio buff there though to the on hit damage from his W, as well as the increase in attack speed now you're going to get from his E, is going to make him a really good AD split push champion for 8.9. So Kassadin is getting buffed for 8.9. His Q shield is being increased by 20 at rank 1. Now this is actually pretty significant in certain matchups, because right now we are seeing a lot of LeBlanc being played. We're seeing quite a bit of Ahri and Fizz. I think that this buff is really going to help out Kassadin for 8.9. He was already a pretty good pick into those champions, but he's going to have an even better time in the laning phase against those picks for next patch. So Unsealed Spellbook here is the final change for this patch we're going to take a look at, and it's pretty much getting completely reworked. So what it's going to do in next patch, or what it's going to allow you to do, is you're now going to be able to swap an equipped summoner spell to a one-time use summoner spell. So if you're running something like Flash and Ignite, you can swap your Ignite to Ghost, but you're only going to be able to use that Ghost that one time, and then it's going to change back to Ignite after you end up using your Ghost. You're not going to be able to use that Ghost though again until you have swapped to 3 other summoner spells. Now your first swap is available at 5 minutes, and you can swap anywhere on the map, but you do have to be out of combat. So overall here, I think that first solo queue, we're probably not going to see a ton of Unsealed Spellbook. I haven't given this one like an up arrow or a down arrow, because I'm just not completely sure whether or not this is going to be good or not. But I think the fact that it's no longer going to give you reduced cooldown now on your summoner spells, and also because it's only available, or it's available at 5 minutes into the game now, it's just not going to be that great of a keystone. You're just not going to have a keystone rune until 5 minutes into the game. So if you're playing an early game champion, you're probably not going to want to take this rune. For the competitive scene, I can definitely see it being used, because in certain situations, if you're going for like a dragon secure or a baron secure, then you could have someone on your team like swap to smite just to enable you to secure that objective. There is definitely going to be some experimenting to do with this rune in next patch, but right now I'm just not completely sold on it as being a good option for solo queue. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. These were the most significant changes heading into patch 8.9. Let me know what you do think of the changes down in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.